Morning, we are going to continue to talk about, this has just been really exciting to me to go backwards in the Bible and look at the Old Testament. You know, the Old Testament is kind of hard to preach on sometimes because sometimes it's heavy, right? And a lot of it is stories. And so it's like, how do you take stories and that kind of thing? But I tell you what, the Old Testament is so rich. And the thing that we've been looking at lately is how God, through these Old Testament writers and prophets and kings and priests and all these different people, how he has been, how he pointed the way to Jesus. And how he was creating this whole story, this whole season of preparation for what Jesus was getting ready to do. And so we've been looking at different ways that he did that. Last week, you guys remember we talked about Moses? And we talked about how Moses, his very life was a picture of the life of Jesus in so many different ways. And as I started researching it and looking into it, I was just blown away by the number of ways that there were parallels that some of them I had never even seen before until I started really researching it. So I would encourage you, if you haven't heard that one, go back and listen to that one. This morning, we're not going to talk about a person whose life kind of reflects the life of Jesus, but actually a thing. And I want to start off by reading the words to this song. And this is like one of those old worship songs. Those of you that have been around the church for a while, you know this song. We sang it, and man, when we sang it, we were in the presence of God. I mean, it was just one of those songs, you know what I mean? And so this is what it is. Actually, I think somebody redid the song. It originally was Petra, I think, and then it was somebody else. But it says this: "Take me past the outer courts to the holy place," right? You guys with me? Some of you guys are like, oh yeah, you want to flick your Bics, you know? Past the brazen altar, Lord, I want to see your face. Pass me by the crowds of people and the priests who sing your praise. Lord, I hunger and thirst for your righteousness, and it's only found one place. Take me into the holy of holies. Take me in by the blood of the Lamb. Take me into the holy of holies. Take the coal, cleanse my lips. Here I am. Okay, you guys remember? Some of you guys, you're like, yeah. You remember that? When you sang it, your heart was just engaged with God. You felt like you were in the very temple of God. And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about the tabernacle. This place that God asked his people to create. And it's an interesting place because, from the beginning, God has always wanted to be among his people. And I think that's the thing that makes him unique and the thing that sometimes we might forget about. And I've heard people say, I remember this politician and his wife, and they were like, we believe in Jesus, or we believe that there is a God. But I remember her saying, she had gone through some challenges in her life, and I remember her saying, but God is distant. He's up there, And you remember that song? It was like a Bette Midler song back in the... I'm dating myself today, aren't I? What was that? It was God from a distance. You remember that song, From a Distance? The world, God is watching us. God is watching us from a distance, right? But I think sometimes they've missed that God is actually wanting to be close to us. God is wanting to be walking with Adam and Eve in the garden. And I look at James chapter 4, verse 8. It says this about God. It says, "Come near to God, and he will" what? He'll come to you. He'll come near to you. But there's like a little bit of a caveat in there, isn't it? There's this approach that we have to God first, and then the result of that is as we approach God, then He approaches us too. I'm so glad we sang that Reckless Love song, you know? Reckless love of God, that He is passionately pursuing us, but He's also waiting for us to passionately pursue Him as well. Paul, when he was talking to the people in Athens, Greece, you might remember they had this like statue, and on the base of the statue it said, "To an unknown God." And he's like, I'm going to tell you who that unknown God is, because He has made Himself known. And this is what it says, Acts 17:26. He said, "From one man He made all the nations that they should inhabit the whole earth. And He marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands." And listen to this. God did this so that they would seek Him and perhaps reach out for Him and find Him, though He is not far from any of us. Isn't that beautiful? He is not far from you. And then the psalmists were always writing about, their relationships with God, right? And one psalmist, his name was Asaph. He wrote Psalm 73. And this is what it says in verse 27. "Those who are far from you, God, will perish. You destroy all who are unfaithful to you. But as for me, it is good to be near God. I have made the sovereign Lord my refuge. I will tell of all your deeds." See, throughout history, people have been seeking Him and have been finding Him when they've done that. In Isaiah's prophecy, he said, one is coming. The Lord Himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and His name will be
Jesus.
Emmanuel. It is Jesus. But it means God with us. And I've always seen such beauty in that. God with us. So we've been looking at this pattern here in the New Testament. God dropping hints of what He was getting ready to do. And one of the ways that He did that is in this picture of the tabernacle. And the reason why God had them build a tabernacle was for this very reason. Because God wanted to be in the midst of His people Israel. And so here they were wandering the desert, and every so often they would stop and they would set up camp. And you know what was right in the middle of their camp was this tabernacle, this place that was built for God Himself to dwell. It says this in Exodus 40, verse 34. This is what happened when the presence of the Lord came. It says, "Then a cloud came. It covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle." The glory of the Lord. So you can imagine, just imagine you've got your place where you live, this tent, because you're wandering the desert, right? So you've pitched your place. And every time you look out of the camp, you look and you see this there's the tabernacle there in the middle, and you see this flame coming down from the heavens and filling the temple. And you see this cloud, what is it? Fire, cloud by day and the fire by night of the presence of God. And I don't know whether I'd be fearful of that. Sometimes they were fearful because they knew of the glory of the Lord, right? And so there was this fear, but also just think of the comfort of His presence with you as you're wandering through the desert and you're encamped there. So I like British TV shows. I'm finding. And lately, what's that?
Is it all right, governor?
Mary Poppins is coming. I'm excited about that new one. But lately, I've been watching this show. It's Interior Design Challenge. Okay, and I love shows that where people with really, really amazing talents like display their talents. And so what it is it's this competition where they give these amateur designers a room in a house, and they go in and they can do whatever they want to this room, right? And it just amazes me, like, how they can take this place that's boring or ugly or cluttered or whatever it is, and all of a sudden by the end of the show, that homeowner walks into that room and they're like, what? Wow! And people are like, oh my gosh, like, I don't even recognize this as the same place, right? And actually the Brits, they're a little bit different. Like, the Americans are always like, whoa, you know, but the Brits are like, ooh, you know. They're like a little more subtle about it, but you can tell the eyebrows, you know, still go up. And so I've been working on a room in our basement, right? And I was like, I'm going to do this the same way. Like, I painted and I rearranged and I like came up with all these little furnishings and stuff like that. And this was a big deal to me, right? And I was like, nobody's coming in here until I am done. You cannot see it, right? And so at the end, I got done. I did all my last minute rearrangements. And then I'm like, okay, now it's time for the big reveal, right? So I was like, okay, everybody come downstairs, you know, and everybody came in and I really wanted them to be impressed. I was going to be really disappointed if they were like, you know, because sometimes my family, they're like not really super expressive. But I was like really thankful because they walked in and they were like, oh, this is great. Like so much more space and all this kind of thing. As I think about that, I just think about how picky I started becoming about how that room looked. I was like, this has a certain place now, and it's going to go right here. That wall, it's going to be this exact color, and I have to get right along to the edge, and like everything has to be very precise. In fact, if somebody comes and messes with my stuff now, they're in trouble, right? You know? So like, your Wii is going to go in this box and like all this kind of stuff. You know, that's kind of what God did. There's like all these chapters in the Bible that like detail out like this tabernacle. Mm-hmm. And of course we come to them and they're like, oh my gosh, do I have to read this? Like, what in the world? Like, why do I have to know how many like cubits this tent, you know, this wall of this tent is going to be, and what materials this is going to be made of, and what elements are going to go in it, like these proper places, right, in this whole tabernacle. But I just want to say, like, there's nothing that God wastes his time on. And the reason why I want to spend some time talking about this tabernacle today is because God spent so much time giving us the details of what he wanted. And you know what the author of Hebrews says? He says that this tabernacle was a pattern of the real thing that's in heaven. Look in Hebrews chapters 8 and chapters 9. God is so precise in the way that he wanted it. And let me tell you a little bit about it. Here's Hebrews 8:5. Let me read this to you. It says, they, meaning the high priests, serve at a sanctuary that is a copy and a shadow of what is in heaven. This is why Moses was warned that when he was about to build the tabernacle, see to it that you make everything according to the pattern shown you on the mountain. See, God told him, you are to be very precise. This is exactly how I want it. And so imagine with me, this is kind of what it looks like, and I think we have a few pictures perhaps as well. Imagine with me a rectangle of curtains, and this was about 100 cubits long. Now, what is a cubit? No one's really 100% sure what the exact biblical measurement was, but essentially what I understand is a cubit was, well, everybody go like this. All right? From your elbow to your fingertips, that's your cubit. All right? I don't know whose measurement it was, but it was probably around about 150 feet long, okay? And then it was about, it was 50 cubits wide.